Hello everyone, it's Ryan Baxter and we're back again with another video for Bluemix, and this time we're going to talk about the Internet of Things. Now I'm very new to the Internet of Things. It's just something I've started to play around with, and after poking around a little bit I decided to get started with a very simple example using a Texas Instruments sensor tag. Texas Instruments sensor tag has a variety of sensors on it. It has a gyroscope, a magnetometer, an accelerometer. It can measure ambient temperature, object temperature, barometric pressure, humidity. It even has two buttons on it that when clicked will publish when they are clicked and which one is clicked. And I actually have a sensor tag right here. So this is what a sensor tag looks like. All the sensors are pretty much underneath this rubber cover. The two buttons, the left and right buttons, are at the top here, and there's a power button on the side to turn the sensor tag on. Now, what we're going to do today, or what I'm going to show you today, is a demonstration using the sensor tag and how to fetch data from the sensor tag and publish it to the Internet of Things cloud, and then consume that data within some different applications. So in the diagram here, we're going to connect to the sensor tag via Bluetooth. So the sensor tag talks over Bluetooth low energy, which is a little bit different than the normal Bluetooth in that you don't have to pair the device with the machine that it's talking to over Bluetooth, which is really nice. So you can just connect to it. And you can connect to the sensor tag either over anything that talks Bluetooth low energy, such as a laptop computer, a Raspberry Pi or a Beaglebone Black, or your phone, your iPhone or your Android device as well. And the device is going to fetch data from the sensor tag and then publish it to IBM's Internet of Things cloud using MQTT. So IBM is providing an Internet of Things cloud, which is essentially an MQTT server in the cloud that you can use for your Internet of Things projects. And then Bluemix is going to host some applications, a Node-RED application and a Node.js application that's going to subscribe to the data published by the sensor tag and then do something with that data. In the Node-RED instance, we'll just put it out to the debug tab, and the Node.js instance will show two different applications that are using the data to do different things with the sensor tag. Now for today's demonstration, I'm actually going to connect to the sensor tag using a Beaglebone Black. So I have a Beaglebone Black right here. It's kind of like a Raspberry Pi almost. Does some of the same things. It has a few different ports on it. You can see it has a micro USB port here that is plugged into my Mac, and that allows me to SSH into the Beaglebone Black. There's also an Ethernet port here that is plugged into the internet, so the Beaglebone Black is connected to the internet. There's a separate power jack, but right now it's being powered by my USB connection to my computer. There's also a USB port here, and I have a USB Bluetooth low energy adapter plugged into my Beaglebone Black so it can talk to the sensor tag over Bluetooth. And there's also some ports that we're not using. There's a micro SD port on the bottom and a micro HDMI port as well for display, but we're not going to use those for the demo today. But this is what it looks like. It's pretty simple. It's pretty cheap. It costs about 50 bucks, and the USB adapter costs another $14, I think. So pretty cheap to get started with one of these things. Okay, so let's get started with the demo. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is SSH into the Beaglebone Black, so we can actually get some code on there that will connect to the sensor tag. So you can SSH into root at 192.168.7.2, and that's just following the instructions that come with Beaglebone Black. That's the IP address, and the root user has no password, so you can just SSH right into it. And now that we're here, we need to clone a GitHub repository that contains the code that will actually run and connect to the sensor tag for us. So I've published some code here out to this GitHub repository. And I can clone this GitHub repository right on our Beaglebone Black. So I'm just going to use a git clone command and paste in the git URL. And this will actually clone that repository down to the Beaglebone Black. So now if I see, we should have a IoT sensor tag repository here. So if I cd into the IoT sensor tag directory, there will be a couple directories in there. There's a Node-RED directory, which will come back to a publish directory and a subscribe directory. So we're going to publish data from the Beaglebone Black to the IoT cloud. So we're going to cd into the publish directory. And once we're here, if we do the same thing here in GitHub, and read through these instructions, basically it says that the first thing we need to do is we need to have a file called config.properties that contains device registration data from the IoT cloud. So the way we can get that is to go over to the IoT cloud here. And you can sign up for the IoT cloud beta, and it's free of charge right now, so you can sign up with your IBM ID and password. I have already signed up, so I'm just going to log in here. And what happens when you sign up is you get a organization, and you can register devices as well as API keys with the IoT cloud that you can then use to connect devices to the IoT cloud and publish and retrieve data. So we're going to add a device here, and we're going to add a device that's publishing sensor tag data. So sensor tag is one of the options listed in the drop-down here of device type. And then we need a device ID, and this is your device MAC address. So it's the machine, the MAC address of the machine that's going to be publishing the data to the IoT cloud. So we need to head back to our terminal window here for our Beaglebone Black. Let me just clear the terminal window, and we need to get the MAC address of the Ethernet port that's connected to the internet. So we can easily do that by doing ifconfig and then saying ETH0. And right up here is the hardware address, otherwise known as the MAC address of the Ethernet adapter. So I'm going to copy that, and we're going to head back to our IoT cloud. And this expects it to not have any colons in it, so we're just going to take the colons out of the MAC address before we click continue. And now that the device is registered, it will provide you with some properties that you need to connect to the IoT cloud. And basically you're going to need this auth token is the most important part here. So we need to copy these properties, because once you click done here, you won't be able to get back to these properties. So make sure you copy and save them off before you leave this page. So we're going to copy these properties, and we're going to open a text editor on the Beaglebone Black and create a new file with these properties in it within the publish directory. So we're just going to start up Nano here and paste the properties in, and then we're going to Control O to write out the file, and we're going to call it config.properties. And now that we've saved the file, we can just exit right out of Nano. And the last thing we do before we start up the application is to run npm install, so it installs all the node dependencies for the application. Alright, so that's finished successfully. So now I'm just going to clear the terminal window again so we can get rid of some of that stuff. And now we're ready to start the application. So we just run node sensortag.js, and that will kick off a node application that will allow you to connect to the sensor tag and publish data to the IoT cloud. So when I start up this application, the first thing it's going to do is print out our device MAC address, which is the MAC address we got when we ran the ifconfig. We'll see that there's a message saying make sure the sensor tag is on, and then a message saying that the MQTT client connected to the IoT cloud. So we know that our properties file that we created containing our auth token and that information was successful, since we were able to successfully connect to the IoT cloud. Now we just need to turn on our sensor tag, so I'm going to go ahead and click the button on the side of our sensor tag to turn it on. And as soon as we turn it on, we'll see that the program discovers the sensor tag is on, and it's connected to the sensor tag, and in a couple seconds here it's going to print out some basic information about the sensor tag, and that's how we know that everything is up and running. We've connected, and we're actually starting to publish data to the IoT cloud. So then now we just want to see that we're actually publishing data to this IoT cloud, right, and we're actually getting things running. And there's a very convenient and easy way to do that using Bluemix. So Bluemix has a runtime or an application called Node-RED, and Node-RED makes it really easy to connect to the sensor tag and fetch data from different topics that might be published to the IoT cloud. So to do that, we're going to just jump back to Firefox here, and we'll go over to Bluemix, and we're going to go over to the catalog. And there's a nice Internet of Things boilerplate starter that we can use to get started with here. So I'm going to select that. And basically, that's going to give us Node-RED plus a cloud and database that Node-RED is going to use to store the different flows that you create within the application in a database. So we're going to give our application a very simple name. We'll call it sensor tag Node-RED, and then click create. And this will spin up our Node-RED instance here. And once it has done spinning up the Node-RED instance, we need to do one more thing before we are able to connect to the Internet of Things from Node-RED. So we can see we have our Node-RED sensor tag application here, and we can select this. It's in the middle of starting itself up. But we need to add one more service to this in order to connect to the Internet of Things cloud, so we're going to click Add Service. And if we scroll down to the bottom here, there's an Internet of Things category and an Internet of Things service. So we're going to select that service, and basically we want to first change the name of the service, so we're going to call it IoT Sensor Tag. And then we're also we need an API key and an auth token. So where do we get the API key and auth token? Well, we get that back from at the Internet of Things cloud. So we're going to click Done to this dialog since we already have created our file with the device information. Now we need an API key. So we click on this API key tab up here. I'm going to add a new API key. This automatically will generate an API key and auth token for us. So again, make sure you copy this information down before you get rid of it, because once you've gotten rid of it, you will not be able to get it back. You'll have to delete it and create a new one. So we're going to copy this API key, and we're going to go and enter it here in the service creation dialog, and same thing with the auth token. We're going to go and create it here, put it here in the auth token field. And now I'm going to click create. It's going to basically say you need to restart Node-RED, and we're going to say OK to that after we bound the service. Okay, now we can see that our Node-RED application has restarted. So great. So now we can get started building our flows in Node-RED. So I'm going to launch the application here, and I'm going to click the Go to Node-RED Flow Editor. And by default, we have nothing here on our canvas. Now you can see there's some IoT nodes over here that we probably are actually pretty useful. But I actually already have a flow that I want to use that I've already created. So back in our GitHub repository, if we go back to the top level directory, there's a Node-RED directory here. And this contains a flow, the JSON for a flow that we can use in our Node-RED instance. So I'm just going to copy this right from our GitHub repository, and I'm going to go back to Node-RED, and you can import flows just by going to this drop-down menu here and select Import From in Clipboard, and I paste the JSON that I copied it from GitHub here, and click OK. And you can see this creates 4 different IoT nodes, and it publishes them to 4 different debug nodes. Now there's a reason why I'm doing this, and I'll explain it to you in a second, but to deploy this flow to the Node-RED instance in Bluemix, we're just going to click the deploy button, and we'll see that we've now successfully deployed. Now if we go over to our debug tab, we see we already have our data that's being published from our sensor tag here to the debug tab. That's what these debug nodes are actually doing. They're just outputting the data to this tab. And you can see it's kind of hard to see what's going on, so you can easily shut these things off. So if I go ahead and shut off everything except for the first one, we'll be able to see something a little bit more consistent. So I'll clear the debug tab, and now we'll see that every 5 seconds or so the sensor tag is publishing data about what the pressure is, the humidity, the object temperature, the ambient temperature, etc. here. So every 5 seconds that will come across. And that's, again, coming from our sensor tag that is connected to our Beaglebone Black that is then publishing the data to the IoT cloud, and then our Node-RED instance in Bluemix is connected to the IoT cloud, consuming the data that's coming from that sensor tag. And that's very easy to do. You're able to get that up and running very quickly. We can turn this one off and turn on some of the other ones, like maybe the accelerometer data, and this publishes much more frequently, as does the gyroscope and magnetometer as well. And we can see the values for the accelerometer coming from the sensor tag as well. So I'll turn that off. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that the node application that's running on the Beaglebone is actually publishing 4 different topics of data. That's what these 4 different nodes correspond to. And you can see which topics are being published just by looking here. These are the topics that you can subscribe to from the Node.js application that's publishing data. So we have one for air properties like the temperature, the humidity, the pressure, etc. And then we have another one for the gyroscope, the accelerometer, and the magnetometer. So if you just want data from one of the specific sensors, or you just want things related to the air temperature, etc., you can only subscribe to those topics as opposed to subscribing to everything, which is kind of convenient for application developers. So you could do a whole bunch of things with the data in Node-RED. You could pipe the data and save it into a database, and then you could create some type of web service on top of that database, all within this flow editor within Node-RED. But I'm not going to go through that today. I want to actually show you another way to consume the data from the sensor tag that we have running that's publishing data to the IoT cloud, and that's the other part of the application in the other part of the code in the GitHub repository within the subscribe directory. So within the subscribe directory is another Node.js application. This application can be deployed again to Bluemix, and it also connects to the IoT cloud, but it allows you to see the data that's coming from the sensor tag in a different way than what you see in Node-RED. So we can easily push this application to Bluemix as well. So from our terminal window here, I'm already in the subscribe directory. You can see that I'm in the subscribe directory of that GitHub repository. And I'm just going to execute my CF push and let the manifest that's part of the project take care of everything for me. So it's going to create my project, it's going to bind to our IoT service, and it's going to publish and start our Node.js application. Okay, we can see that our application is up and running here. It's at sensortagdemos.mybluemix.net. And if we copy that URL and go out to the browser here, we'll get brought to a page. Now the first thing we can do is do this visualization, which kind of just visualizes the data that's coming from the sensor tag. So we need to tell it a device ID, and that's the MAC address of the Beaglebone Black that's publishing the data. So notice that that's a common pattern here. So the Beaglebone, the node application running on the Beaglebone Black published the device MAC address for us, so it's really convenient. So we just copy that MAC address here and paste it in here and click connect. And we'll see that after a couple of seconds here, if we start fetching data, we'll see that the object and ambient temperature is being graphed from the sensor tag. We can see what the magnetometer and gyroscope data looks like, kind of in a cube format, and where we're moving the sensor tag. As I move it, we'll see that it changes locations of the cube. We also see the barometer and the humidity as well down at the bottom. So that's one simple visualization. The other one's a little bit more interesting. And one of the things that I thought about doing with the sensor tag is using the 2 buttons on the sensor tag, the left and right click buttons, as a way of controlling an HTML5 slide deck. So kind of like when you have a PowerPoint or a Keynote, and you have one of those devices that usually connects to your computer or Bluetooth or USB, and you can go back and forth between the slides using the left and right buttons on the device for a PowerPoint or Keynote slide. If you have an HTML5 based slide deck, it's hard to do, right? You can't connect to the USB or Bluetooth or HTML5 and access that data. But you could connect to the IoT cloud, because it's a web-based application, and get whether you click the left or right buttons on the sensor tag and flip the slides based on that. So if I do the same thing, I click on this button here, it's going to bring me to this HTML5 slide deck using Reveal.js, actually is the library I'm choosing to use. And again, I need my device ID, so I'm going to paste in my MAC address and click connect. And now if I click the left and right buttons on my sensor tag, you can see that we flip through the slides as I click them. So once I click, and I can go left to right and go to previous or next slide right from my sensor tag. So that's kind of a slightly interesting use case for the buttons on the sensor tag. You kind of build your own presentation remote control device based on the sensor tag. Now, connecting through the Beaglebone Black in this case probably isn't necessary. You could also just connect right to your Mac and have your Mac or your PC publish data to the IoT cloud from the sensor tag if you want to. But just to kind of make it go full circle, this is kind of one of the simple use cases for Internet of Things type of device. And that's my exploration into the Internet of Things. So it's been quite the learning experience. There's a lot of great technologies. Feel free to check out the source code in the GitHub repository. It's all written in Node.js using various libraries, but you can choose to do the same thing in Java or whatever other language, Python, that you may want to use. So thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed.